Hello everybody, my name is Ian Kirkpatrick. I'm an author and a robot, and today we're going to look at some writing questions and answer some writing, have some writing discussions. So I'm always looking forward to your guys' answers to the questions in the comments down below. And clearly today we have a special guest. Tatum, the American Eskimo, is going to be joining us. We'll see for how long, if he makes it through the whole video. Oh boy. He just wanted some attention and love, so that's what we do here. But before we get started, a couple of things. Number one, if you enjoy what I do on this channel, please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more support. And hopefully some new ideas will be coming along to make cool things happen on the channel. And number two, if you would like your work featured on this channel, check out the two links down in the description below, Lamoy and PitchFit, two different ways to have your work featured here. We just did the third PitchFit ever on this channel over the weekend, so check that out. And I don't know, it's really hard to get yourself noticed, so that's what I'm trying to do here. Now, with that said, oh my goodness, Tatum's. Here we go. We're gonna get the dog cam. I know, baby. With that said, let's go ahead and get started. Writing boring scenes. How do you write them? You don't. That's the secret. You don't write boring scenes. Okay, so the general suggestion, the general recommendation is if you are bored writing a scene, then your readers are going to be bored reading a scene. And that's not to say that every scene needs to be full of action and all of this crazy stuff, but if you are generally not enjoying writing a scene, then it may not be the right scene for your book, and you might not need it to tell that story. My recommendation would be, if you're really struggling, and that's not to say that you will not struggle with writing scenes that are necessary to your book, because boring scenes and struggling writing are two totally different things. But ultimately, you should be able to look at a scene and go, okay, this isn't that bad. But my recommendation would be, if you're struggling with a scene, if it's the first draft, don't worry about it so much. Just write what you need to write in order to get to the end of your story, to figure out what it is your story is about. But after that, start, as you revise and edit, start figuring out what is necessary to tell your story, what scenes can be taken out, what scenes need to be added. And if a scene is boring, figure out why it's boring. Figure out if it's necessary for your story. What is it exactly doing for your story? Is there something that your characters are accomplishing in that scene that is necessary to move the story along? Because every scene should have some sort of relation to what it is your characters are trying to accomplish. Now, everything that your characters do may not directly apply to the plot of the story, but it will apply to what the characters need to do in order to move the story forward. Like if I look at Bleed More, Body More, the first book, the first chapter, Joey is picking up a car at the body shop because in the first chapter, Joey's just picking up a car for her job because she needs to go to the park to pick up this car, and she takes it back to the body shop and she finds a body in the corpse. So, her friend is missing. So if I'm looking at the storyline, her goal, her plot line is that she needs to find her missing friend. However, she gets to work because, the cops want to talk to her, and she also has a shift, so she really can't just skip work to go looking for her missing friend. Now, once she's done talking to the cops, she has time off, and so she goes looking for her friend at the park where she can't find him. So after that, she ends up at Fort Armistead, where she normally skates. It's one of her few skating spots that she likes to frequent, to think and to blow off steam, because she's trying to think of where to look for Wayland next. She's hoping that her friend texts her to tell her where he is, any of this stuff. And so her exact goal at that moment is to brainstorm, blow off steam, and kind of wait around for what is her goal of finding her friend. So your two things of what the character is trying to do and what they are currently doing and what your plot is may not all be the same thing at the same time. Anyway, going back to writing a boring scene, figure out what your character is doing in that scene, why they are there, and if it is necessary in order for the character to get to where they are trying to go, or what they're trying to do, or they're relevant to their mood, and that'll help. But generally, if you write a scene that you think is boring and then you leave it in there, the readers can tell. At least I can tell. When I was reading his name was Augustine series, every time it goes into when it goes into summary of like skipping over a bunch of stuff just to move to the next thing, it constantly feels like the author is writing the boring spots to get to the good spots that are the few character interactions that are in that book. So just note that if you think a scene is boring, especially if it's a summarization to move from point A to point B, the readers will know. Just skip it. There's really no problem with just skipping between major events. If you just if you know how to connect them, which, again, Bodymore does this, where I don't necessarily write her going from place to place. There's an implication of where she's going at the end of a scene, or at the end of a chapter, and then in the next chapter she just starts there, as opposed to skipping through a bunch of time. So there are a bunch of different ways to handle that, so you don't have to write unexciting scenes or scenes where stuff doesn't matter just because you need time passage. Is all up to you to figure out how to navigate that in the most compelling way possible. Did you want to go down? Okay. It looks like our buddy is done giving tips, so what's a good place to ask writery research questions? I don't mean questions pertaining to the writing craft. I mean research questions for writing that I'd rather not mess up my search history or put in my watch list. Also questions where looking them up from square one would be a 2-day affair versus a yes or no. So some things like some of the examples here are: what physical sensations would occur when a lung collapses from sea pressure? Would other body parts collapse first? What's the easiest method to melt a body, assuming easy access to a nearby Walmart but a backyard within smelling distance of the neighbors? For that one, I would just Google it. Freaking just Google. Maybe it's because I'm already on some lists, probably, between my book with the freaking bomb maker and my Jeffrey Dahmer book, where I've looked up, different methods of melting bodies down in the different chemical compositions, and I've written about the different chemical compositions. I've given up. But you can also talk to scientists. You can talk to people, chemists, like specifically in that second one, maybe. Reading true crime books where specifically the people maybe did melt down bodies and the descriptions of that kind of stuff, but you have to find the good true crime books with the what physical sensations would occur for lungs to collapse. Think of who that would involve. So you can talk to physicians, you can talk to doctors, you can talk to divers. I know that cops generally really like when people come and ask, hey, if they have questions about how working as a cop works, and you can actually ask to do ride-alongs where you go on the day's trip with the cops as they go about their job. You just ride in the car and you see how they work and you see what they do. And generally you can just contact all of these professionals in all these different areas, and sometimes you'll get more responses than others, but a lot of authors do actually contact people who are professionals in these fields. And I'm not talking about like going up to people that are like national level scientists, but you talk to smaller ones. Even you can look for scientific papers that are published in kind of the general area or the field, and a lot of those papers are just published by regular researchers that will have the time to answer your questions if you contact them respectfully. So if you really, really don't want to put in the time to look at a bunch of research, and or you don't just trust what you're going to Google search, look for scientific papers or professionals in those fields, and then personally contact them and ask them basically interview questions about these different things. How do you guys motivate yourselves to write? A few months ago, I got terribly low grade on my English external exam, specifically a story writing part. Writing stories was pretty much all I spent my time doing, so seeing that grade was particularly soul-crushing. Since then, I haven't been able to write. I don't have writer's block. The ideas are coming and coming, but whenever I sit down to try and write them, I start crying. It's really frustrating. I tried pushing through a few times, but I got headaches when I cry, so I couldn't focus at all. Okay, so you just have to get a thick skin, because also if you intend to publish your work and write publicly rather than keep it to yourself, you're inevitably going to get critical reviews or harsher reviews that is going to be very similar to these bad grades that you're talking about, and sometimes even personal. Like, I've gotten reviews that talk about me as a person or make assumptions about me as a person. And you just have to not let it affect you. And that sounds like it's just shrugging it off, but it's inevitably something that's going to happen. And you focus less on the way that you motivate yourselves through it is, one, if you have to cry to get through it, to basically mourn what happened, You do that. If you need to talk to your friends about what happened, you do that. You get your friend that you can rant at, and you just do that. But then you focus on what is it about that writing that is important to you, because you're also never going to be, you're not going to start out the best. So you are going to have critical responses from teachers or from crit partners if you are getting genuine responses. Now, there's also the difference between the crit partner that just rips everything apart and the crit partner that is actually helpful and tells you what is helpful. But the best way to stay motivated is keep in mind what is important to you about writing. Is it the stories that you're telling? Is it an imperative? Personally, like, I go through feelings of low of like, what the crap am I doing all of the time? I cannot tell you how many times I've been like questioning so much what I'm doing with Bodymore 2. Bodymore 1 I questioned the crap out of. Boom I questioned the crap out of. I feel like Bodymore 2 has just been much more self-doubt than I have ever had before. But I don't think I can compare it to the other works because there's so much just time between them all. But I have those feelings of doubt too, and all I can do is focus on continually telling the stories that I have to tell, because it's an imperative that I share the worlds that I have and these characters that just keep coming. And the point is not necessarily to please everybody who is critical. I'm going to take into account the critical feedback that does actually pertain to what I'm trying to work on or what I'm trying to accomplish. But I'm not going to take it personally when somebody doesn't like what I'm doing, or they say something that is massively inaccurate about who I am or what I am, because I know better. The best thing that you can do for yourself is to start building your self-esteem and your worth and the worth of your work and the confidence based on the value that you place on yourself and your work, and not through the opinions of others. You have to build up that skin, and you have to build up a way to appreciate yourself against the bad things. Also, I'm going to agree with this person down here. If you're literally crying when you start trying to write, you need a solid break. Yeah, you're not going to help yourself write or enjoy writing more if you're breaking down crying when you think about writing. Just take a break. Have a good time. What motivates you more, the wish to write a compelling story or the thought of people enjoying it? I can't say either of those necessarily, because they both pertain specifically to my motivation being outside of me. The compelling story is this is a subjective thing. Some people will find a story compelling that others won't. And the thought of people enjoying enjoyment is also a subjective thing. And so I don't really put my motivation in how I think something is going to be received. I actually think that that can be damaging to your motivation and to how hard you work, especially if you put something out, it's not well received, and you're supposed to consider whether your story might be compelling when maybe a bunch of people said the last one wasn't compelling, and you're like, well, it wasn't compelling and it wasn't enjoyable. I'm more motivated to solidify an idea in a world and a feeling and these characters and package it in something that I can share with somebody else. Like, it's when I'm listening to a story. Oh, I thought this the other day when I was driving. I was just driving by and I saw something. I can't even remember what it was at this point. It was so stupid. But I was just like, ooh, I got a vibe. I need to use that vibe in a story because I want to pass. This is such a cool vibe. This is such a cool feeling to be in this moment. And I somehow got to capture this feeling and put it in this thing so that I can share it with somebody else. And that's also one of the reasons why I want my books to become movies, so I can make them into music videos and I can just share the vibe that I see in my head with these other people. So really, it's just sharing with people. What compels me the most is being able to share what I see through these characters, and to capture their lives and what they go through, and to translate that for somebody else to see what I see. Do you consider outlining to be part of your writing routine, or do you try something else? So we've probably all heard about writing frequently in order to keep up the habit. Write a page a day or X words a day. My question for those of you who prefer to outline is, do you consider your outline a part of your writing routine, or do you try to get in some more traditional writing at the same time? Since I don't really outline, I can't answer this question for you. The closest way that I outline is like a bullet point or notes in a paragraph, like in half paragraph. Sometimes it's just a sentence of what I want to happen in a chapter, and that is pretty much my outline. And then if I think of notes or interactions or like scenes that I want to do, that goes into my notes on the side to figure out where those would fit in the story that I'm working on. And then I grab those from there and drop them in when it makes sense when I get there. But I don't consider anything I put in notes to be part of my writing. Part of my writing requirements for the day. I really don't do very much outlining. but it seems like everybody is obsessed with outlining, so good on you if you are. Is it normal to doubt yourself and wonder if you can ever make it as a writer, to question if your work is even worth being critiqued? Yes. I mean, I already talked about this pretty much in this video, so I'm not really going to extrapolate on that or, talk about that all that much more. But yes, it is very normal to think that your work is crap, to think you're wasting your time, to question what you're doing with your life. It happens all the time. It happens pretty much on the daily for me, I'm pretty sure. And all you can do is, you can stop writing, I guess. Or you can have those feelings and continue writing until they go away. Or you can have those feelings and continue writing through those feelings. Thank you, Tatum. But yes, it happens. It's not just you, and you're not a failure for feeling that way or thinking that way. And I think, especially because this is such a solitary event, such a solitary activity, and then we get stuck in our own heads with our own words for so long before really being able to pass them on to somebody else, especially if you want to polish it so it doesn't feel like complete garbage when you hand it to somebody else. It could be so easy to feel like this is you, and this is only you, and it's just your word that's crap, and it's not. It's unfortunately just part of the crappy process that we all have to go through. And if you're doubting how good your work actually is, it's probably better than you think it is. I'm just going to say, if you have a big ego, perhaps it's not as great as you think it is, but if you have a very, very self-conscious ego, it's probably better than you think it is. It's not as bad as you think it might be. So there is that little silver lining. What advice can you give to a female author to help her write a realistic male love interest? Not a romance novel. I'm just worried that he is a little too perfect. He has some flaws and actually betrays MC, but sometimes I'm scared that he is not well written. What could make him slightly more relatable to the general male audience? Number one, there's no real answer to this question because the male audience is not a monolith. Number two, there's no way to tell you how to make a character more relatable or more likable, or to figure out if they're too perfect or if they're not well written without having read the character. And even at that point, it's still subjective because you'll have people say that something is well written and other people say that it's not well written. So there's also that. But there's no way to answer this without actually having read the character. The recognition of different characters and how realistic they are really is a one-on-one basis, and you can't do broad things like this. The best thing you can do is just treat the characters as real people. Literally study psychology, study characters, study humans, and figure out the type of person that character is, as opposed to forcing them, putting them into a box or trying to make them a trope or trying to make them a certain type of character. Just let them be themselves, and then maybe you can recognize them as a trope or a cliche later, because generally tropes just exist. But my recommendation is let that character just speak for themselves, be themselves, find out who they are, what they like, what they do, without trying to fit it into some kind of box. And then get some legitimate critique partners that you trust to give you legitimate feedback. Study people, read books that are fiction and nonfiction, especially read books from male perspectives or about men, biographies, even memoirs, autobiographies, to see how those minds move. Because if you study individual, and again, we're talking about individuals, while you're studying individuals, you will start internalizing what it is that you're reading, how they think, and you'll start incorporating the stuff that you see into your writing without even thinking it. So that's one of the ways in which reading nonfiction, especially, can help. But if you're reading fiction by men, then you'll also start picking up on their mentalities through how they write, because men and women, just not even, because then we're going to get to monoliths again, but every person writes characters differently and writes stories differently and writes observations differently based on their own perspectives and how they think and feel. So if you want to look at how men write, then you can start seeing how some men think and then start incorporating ideas for how you see that into how you write your characters. Does that make sense? Again, no monolith. You're just studying different people, studying psychology, and then applying it. To those who have an MFA, which places are welcoming to those who are just starting out and are avid readers, but probably haven't read every single critically acclaimed book? So I can only speak on the experience that I had at my MFA program. And number one, when you go into an MFA program, generally what they focus on more is literary fiction as opposed to genre fiction. And you will see kind of a snooty fest between the genre fiction and the literary fiction, even though, I don't know how to say all of this stuff. So, at the very least, we had Benjamin Percy, and I think there was one other person that came that did not write strict literary fiction. Benjamin Percy has a werewolf book, he has a zombie book. He teeters the line with upmarket / literary, but also includes genre, and he writes comic books. And there was definitely different treatment towards him than other people that came in that wrote more clear-cut literary fiction. And I think if you go and look at interviews with him, he talks about kind of straddling that line and what's it like for him as a writer when he goes into the academic setting. Personally, I was not heavily studied or super well read, and I'm still not insanely well read between everybody that gets awards in critically acclaimed books, because I don't really care. I study books that are specifically in my style, and then I do literary analyses on whatever I'm reading that I then present on this channel, which none of them are the critically acclaimed books, because I'm just doing what I like to do. And I think one of the better things that you can do for yourself before going into an MFA is, one of the things you will learn is how to embrace your voice if you haven't embraced it already. But I think you do need a sense of identity in what you want and what you're trying to do, because you will often be pushed in a direction in which the authors there or your mentors might want you to go, or what they think is better, which also is not commercial. One thing that you should definitely know is that MFAs do not teach you how to be commercial. They are academic, they lean on literary, and everybody will tell you literary fiction is harder to sell than genre fiction. That doesn't mean it's worse, that doesn't mean it's anything, but it is different than genre fiction. And if you're wanting to write what's generally super popular, like romance and mystery and thriller and all of that stuff, you may not get the best experience out of an MFA, and you might actually be better suited with mentors and writing groups, and finding somebody who maybe writes in one of those commercial genres to work with you in a small writing group. I did not get along very well with the teachers at my university, because politically we didn't align, and they let me know that. And I actually had a couple of them that pretty much disowned me after some certain things. I graduated in 2016, and you can just imagine the stuff that happened with all that stuff. And I had one of them, he was a poet and a writer, and he said that Dead End Drive reminded him of Ayn Rand. And he didn't like Ayn Rand because he thought that she was too logical in her descriptions of things and her decisions and how she thought stuff logically played out. And that's when I went to go read Ayn Rand. And I don't think it's much of an insult, but he was much more of a loosey-goosey kind of chaotic guy that kind of goes along with the poetry stuff. And so we didn't necessarily see eye to eye on that stuff, but he was not, I think, the most aggressive teacher. I just had difficulty connecting with those teachers because of how differently we thought and the different ways in which we approached things. And I can honestly say none of my teachers, I believe, ever believed in my project or what I was doing. And be prepared, especially if you are coming in different and you know you're coming in different, that you may not have the support in doing the thing that you want to do, and you need to have some level of self-fortitude to chase what you want to do. So I sat down with my thesis advisor at top of term 3. This was the first time that he and I had spoken to each other personally. I really wanted to work with him because he was German and he did dark fiction, and so I kind of do dark fiction. I was working on Dead End Drive at the time, so I was working on a dark comedy / satire, so possibly not the best choice, but I had hopes for it back then. I was also much more naive in my early 20s, and the first thing that he ever said when we sat down together was, how does it feel to be writing a book that will never be published? And that's not very comforting for a project that you really believe in. Dead End Drive is a passion project, and I was thinking to myself yesterday while I was driving, or the other day while I was driving, that aside from what I would probably do for some line edit cleanups to make things read a little nicer in certain places, Dead End Drive, I think, is exactly what I want it to be, where I want it to be. And I love those characters a lot. And then I was thinking of Dead End Drive 2, which is going to be focused, or, the Benedict Estate, which is a prequel, which is going to be focused more on Bertrand and Agatha and their love story and the things that kept them apart, like the racism in the early 1960s going on, where they couldn't even legally live in the same house because of missegregation laws. And so I'm very excited for those characters, but I didn't really have the support for my style of writing in my MFA program. And I remember other people, there was this one guy that was in, I think it was my same class, and he was writing high fantasy. And because the program more focused on literary fiction and pushed people towards literary fiction, he lacked a lot of support and belief in his project for writing what was going to be an epic fantasy series. And he talked about that a couple of times. So I don't think you necessarily, I can't talk about any of the universities or attitudes in the UK. I can say that there generally is an attitude here between the genre fictions and the literary fictions where they're fighting each other over who is better and who is worse. I went into a literary MFA program without being the best read. I came from a theater background. I still don't read award-winning authors specifically. I just read whatever I like. I read a lot of indies, if you haven't noticed. And I think that the most important thing that you can do for yourself is have a sense of who you are, what you want, and focus on that, because you will face adversity in the opinions of others and in your project, and you need to be able to defend your project not only to others, but more importantly to yourself, in the case that people go, no. Because guess what? How many times were the Wright brothers called crazy about wanting to build a plane before they actually did it and they were flying, and everyone is like, you are brilliant. So this is going to be you with your book. And if you believe it when people call you crazy, or that your book is stupid and that it's never going to sell and that you're dumb for wanting to write that story and you should go write something else, you're going to need to be able to tell yourself, I have this. I know what I'm doing, what I would like to do. I just need you to show me the tools that I need to make it happen. And that will help you so much in the long run, with so much when it comes to writing. Anyway, that's my recommendation for MFA. I don't know if that actually answers this question, but let me know if you got an MFA. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below and what your experiences were. Again, I can only talk about mine and the things I experienced and the things that I've seen in the two cultures. And I'm not even going to say that that genre is innocent in the literary versus genre conversation, because then also you end up getting freaking the genres of the genre fiction fighting each other over which genres are stupid. And you know what? Everybody just like what you like, do what you do. The genres just exist to help us figure out how a story works, and I'm learning so much more about the importance of that as I go in setting expectations, specifically because of plot-driven versus character-driven. That is very important to the pacing of a story and the expectations of pacing and focus of a story. So learning all of that, super important, not meant to become an attack device on other people. With all that said, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great Thursday, Happy New Year, and I will see you on the other side. May see you tomorrow at the Loin stream where we start our next read. Thank you again, and don't die.
Was that Wayland Cross in the trunk? Do you know, or is that something that's still being figured out?
The person in the trunk was not Wayland Cross. Is he in trouble? We don't know who did it, but as the owner of the car, the longer he's missing, the worse it looks for him.
Cross isn't a killer.
For the last couple of years, the average number of murders in Baltimore has been over 300, and it's been going up. Mind you, that's only whatever the badges count as official murder, and believe me, there are people that don't count when they die.
Wayland? If you're down here, tell me. I'm not talking to the badges, I've been looking for you. They found a body in your trunk. Why? Did you do that?
To the left, plain black letters read along the wall, "You walked in the corridor. Once that ends, you chose the dark is on the right." My vision goes blurry, flickers black and black for longer intervals until I can't see anything at all. I'm not screaming anymore, but my voice echoes back to me.
Where the hell am I?
You're dead, Josephine. Even smart people do stupid shit sometimes, right?